Just before this video starts, I just want to warn you all that I did a terrible job. The sound quality is bad and the video quality itself is not that great either because some shadows moved in and I didn't really fix it. But what this is an interview with a street photographer or photographer that I know, and I photograph with a bunch of people fairly regularly, and we talk about photography, but it's always kind of fragmented. We never really have proper conversations because we're stopping and starting because we're shooting. And I thought this would be a good way to just have a conversation with someone, record it, and it would at least help me to understand other people's perspectives, because most people have a different perspective to the other people that they shoot with regularly. You know what I mean. So anyways, this video is a guy called Jason. He is a photographer from Atlanta. His Instagram is FreshOuttaFocus, and I knew him through 88 Shots, Bobby, I forget his last name, but he's another photographer that I know through Instagram and YouTube, and that's how I knew who this guy was when I met him in Denver. So this is the first of them. Go easy on my video quality.
So, alright, let's just start with the basics. How did you get started with photography or street photography?
Okay, I initially started flying drones, doing video, aerial video, and some of my clients, my early clients, were asking for stills. So I would sub out the stills work to photographers that I knew that shot stills. It just wasn't a skill set that I had. More so, wasn't a skill set that I was interested in. And then basically I realized after subbing out stills that I had some photographers basically bail on the project. So I realized maybe shooting stills would be something that I need to have kind of in my wheelhouse. So I started shooting stills, and I didn't think it would be fun. Like, I flew drones since the late 80s, and I was like, there's no way that taking a still image from the ground could be as cool as taking images from the sky.
Yeah.
But I was wrong, and I found myself leaving the drones at home. Like, I would take Saturdays and just fly drones for leisure if I didn't have client work, and I started just taking the cameras out, and not having models or weddings or something to shoot, I didn't know street photography was a thing. So I just was like, well, I'll just, like I do with the drones, I'll just pick a spot and start flying. I'll just pick a spot with the camera.
Were drones in the 80s film?
No, digital.
No
way.
Yeah,
a lot of it wasn't real-time imagery though. So you're flying from third person and you're hoping that the angle you have on your camera is catching the scene.
Oh, that's crazy.
So you'd have videos that were kind of tilted like this, and you'd fix them in post. And if you needed a still image, most of that work was just ripping a still out of a video.
How did you end up with street photography then?
So I think I started looking at my shots, and then I just started researching photography on YouTube just to get better. So I didn't know what ISO was, and I didn't know why some of my shots were blurry, and so I started really just trying to learn photography basics, and YouTube being the machine that it is, I think they try to like highlight the most popular subjects, and so I start seeing street photography pop up, and start looking at the shots. I'm like, oh wow, I would like to get into that. I don't think my initial shots of walking around the camera were street photography.
Yeah.
I think it was, and that depends on how you define street photography. That's an entirely different argument. I think my shots were more general photography, like, oh, there's a squirrel, or there's a leaf, or there's an acorn, right? By the street photography definition, I don't think that's street photography, but it is just general photography walking around. I think street photography is more purpose-driven and more intent behind shooting a lamppost, for example, just because you think it looks cool. So,
do you have,
go ahead.
Sorry, do you have influences that sort of took you to where you wanted to go now?
Yeah, lots of influences, but mostly local people. there's the popular YouTubers, I would say, but those aren't the guys that influenced me per se as much as just local photographers that I met while on the street.
Yeah.
When you walk around, like I'm also a musician. If I walk around with my bass guitar, I will meet other bass players or the guitar players because they go, "Oh, what's in the bag?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's an Ibanez." Like, "Oh, well, I play too." It's kind of like that.
Yeah.
So walking around with the camera in Atlanta, Georgia, I would bump into people who either had cameras or were photographers that didn't have a camera that day. They go, "Hey, what are you shooting?" "Oh, well, I shoot, whatever. I shoot Canon or I shoot Sony." And so I start meeting photographers, and then once I was exposed to their work, these guys were already doing street photography proper. I started realizing that the intent behind kind of making an image past the obvious, whether that be through an edit or a crop or time of day, I realized that there were intent. So where I was just walking around just documenting like, hey, here's a library, here's a Subway restaurant, I noticed that the guys I met in Atlanta they had an intent before getting out of the car. Sometimes they just go, today I'm going to do red, and then they'll post a 5-shot series of red, tying them all together, and I'm like, so I started giving myself assignments to train my eye, not because I think that's what you're supposed to do, but it was just to train my eye to look for certain things.
I think it can be I think sometimes it's what you're supposed to do. I feel like, especially if you're kind of aimless.
Yes.
Which I often feel. And if you can sort of spot one thing, and you spot it a couple times,
and then you start tuning yourself into that, right? Yeah. So that's a good example. So initially I'd say, okay, well, I'm going to shoot a red series today, right? And I would go out, and I would only see or kind of gravitate to scenes and subjects that had the color red, and then I'd go home, and I might find some shots that I like. But then I realized, man, I'm missing opportunities because there was a lady with a yellow umbrella that would have been great. So then I switched it up so I can have more keepers per photo walk, right? So let's say you're working on 5 different projects. You're doing an umbrella series, a red series, a forgotten series, which might be something like people have dropped or forgotten on the street. So by having those 3, and you remember, okay, there's an umbrella, I can frame that. Oh, there's something that's red, I can frame that. Oh, there's a shoe in the road. You know what I mean? If you're remembering the 5 or so projects that you're working on, each photo walk is now more fruitful than just looking for red. Because if you're just looking for red, that's okay. But there might be a scene that's not red that you're missing because you're so focused in. What works for me is knowing what projects I have or I want to complete, or bodies of work I want to complete, and just remembering those. And then shooting general street photography, but also remembering, hey, this shot may fit something that I have, in the pipeline.
So you've got your assignments, but you're not like limiting yourself to that.
Oh, no.
You're open to whatever?
I'm open to whatever comes in frame. I am. I think that's the fun part. I think assignments are fun when they're done, not so much while you're shooting them, but I think just being out and being available and being in the moment for any potential shot is fun. Sometimes you go out and I step out of the car and boom, I take one shot and I know it's never going to get better than that. Yeah. But I don't hop back in the car and go home. I still do a photo walk. Yeah. And then sometimes I'm out 2-3 hours and nothing. And but I'm never disappointed because I know that at least I'm out giving myself the opportunity to frame up something.
Yeah.
So.
And I get a lot of questions from people like, I live somewhere boring. There's nothing around me to shoot. I wish I was in a big city or something else was happening. How do you? And I know you travel, and I know you go lots of places. How do you approach quiet towns? Like you're in Colorado Springs right now,
right?
And it's not as
right. I was in Denver yesterday, and Colorado Springs today. I do what's called small town takeovers, and that's just something I made up. But for example, my buddy wanted to shoot Asheville, North Carolina, and I said, okay, only if we shoot Waynesville, North Carolina, which is on the way. And his answer was, what's in Waynesville? And I said, yeah, I know, I don't. So that's why, and I think when you're shooting the slow motion type of shots, the slow motion type of shooting, it teaches you that there is a composition. There are compositions everywhere. My first stint at this was giving myself assignments at home. When I first started shooting, I said, I'm going to shoot 30 shots in 30 days without leaving the house. And you can get even more specific. You can say without leaving the kitchen, for example. And the first 15 days was easy because I did the obvious 15 shots. Well, by the time I got to day 25, I was like, okay, I've shot everything. But you haven't shot everything. You just shot the most obvious things. So I ended up laying on the floor and looking at my kitchen from the floor from that height. And now there's lookups that you do in a city, but you're on the floor looking up at your stove, right? It's weird things. So I go, well, that was easy. So then I go, okay, well now do from day 30 to day 60, the same thing, but don't shoot any compositions that you've already shot in the first 30 days. So you can see it gets harder. Yeah. And you just want to go outside and go, well, I can do this outside, but you can do it from inside too. And then you realize there's unlimited compositions. There really is. So while it may be more exciting to shoot major cities, I think there's some great shots that people have never seen. I've got shots in places that aren't generally photographed. Doesn't mean that the shots are great, but it brings a location to people that may never see. Waynesville, North Carolina is probably where people stop to get gas on the way to Asheville. You know what I mean? People know like the gas station there, and that's it. Yeah. They go, oh yeah, I stopped to get gas there once. And then if you're able to present a shot, they go, wow, I'm like, yeah, but this is Main Street. They're like, who knew? And so I think the small towns are great training grounds. I think you earn those compositions, and there's less pressure, less moving pieces. Shooting a city like Denver, where it's pandemic time, but people are moving around. It's actually a lot more challenging to come up with something unique that hasn't been shot to pieces. It's like people that say, oh, I want to go shoot New York City. I'm like, yeah, that's great, but New York City has been shot. That doesn't mean that that you can't be creative there, but why not Buffalo? I'd like to see more shots from Buffalo. You know what I mean? We get a lot of New York City shots out of New York. Why not Ithaca?
Especially when it's like when you say like finding compositions and if you go to Buffalo, there's architecture there that most people haven't shot, and if you go to New York, everybody's shot the Oculus. Everybody
shots Dumbo. How many Dumbo shots can you see? Yeah. Now don't get me wrong, if I go to New York City to shoot, I've been, but I've never been to shoot, I'm certainly going to shoot the classic compositions. Yeah. Take Atlanta. There's not a street shooter in Atlanta who hasn't done Jackson Street Bridge with the Atlanta skyline. Yeah. And when shooters message me on Instagram, say, hey, I'm in your city, I've looked at some Atlanta hashtags, you look like you know your way around, I certainly take them to get that shot. Do I shoot that bridge? No. I've shot it. You know what I mean? But a guy from New York or Chicago or Seattle may say, hey, I got to have this shot. It's like those are the obligatory shots. Yeah. So you don't go and not shoot the Oculus and not shoot Dumbo if you haven't already. So you do take those shots, but then you kind of go, okay, these are my hit list shots, and then everything else is free for all. So when I shoot a city, most times I have the hit list shots, and I'm pretty sure that my hit list for Denver aren't compositions that the locals still shoot.
One of the things that attracts me with New York is not so much like Times Square and all the cool architecture and stuff. It's just like the busyness of it that I like, and the weirdness. Like people are just weird in the open.
Yes.
Whereas when I find that when you're in Denver or smaller cities, like as a photographer, I've got less cover because there's less people, so you're more noticeable. But in New York, you can sort of like flow with the crowd.
There's so much going on.
Photograph that weird stuff that people do, or just like odd stuff happening in the streets.
Right. The thing about New York that's great is they are used to people walking around with cameras. Yeah. So the shots that you can get there are authentic. They see you, but they don't care. They're like another guy with a camera. where even Atlanta, you think that we'd have the Olympics and we have one of the most popular aquariums on the planet, that people will be used to people with cameras. But there's still that pull up a camera in Atlanta and they instantly stop doing what they were doing.
Yeah.
Where in New York, they're like, this is every day.
Yeah.
They're going from point A to point B, and they don't care. So it is hard to get a scene in some places where you don't bruise the scene, where you're not infecting the shot.
Yeah.
Sometimes, if you're looking for eye contact, infecting the shot with your presence is exactly what you want.
Mm-hmm.
But then sometimes, I pull up the camera and then they spot me and then they immediately stop doing what drew me to them, and now there's no shot for me. So
how do you deal with those situations? Like, do you ever, like a lot of people, like myself included, feel real awkward and kind of like scared to be caught? How do you handle stuff like that?
So here's what I think, that people are a lot like animals. We pick up on fear, and I don't know how, we just do. And I know that I'm not doing anything illegal per se, and what I always do when I shoot someone and they catch me is I smile and I give them a thumbs up and I disarm them, because then they're like they're like, okay, that was weird, but he's cool.
Yeah.
If you just kind of scurry off, they're thinking, what was that about? They might go, hey, did you just take my picture?
Yeah.
So I haven't been, I've heard stories. Of people getting their cameras taken from them and thrown down on the ground. And I've often considered what would happen if things got really bad really quickly. But one thing that I think a street photographer should be able to do is disarm people and quickly. So I know you've heard of the Strangers Project out of New York, 100 Strangers, and I started doing that and asking people to take their street portrait, not to post, but really just to get used to the rejection.
Yeah.
And what I learned is the more I asked, the more yeses I got. Initially, nobody said yes, and then I go, well, that's probably a me problem. And one thing I learned is to look like the place that you're going to shoot. So if you're shooting in an urban environment and you're wearing a 3-piece suit with a camera, you're not going to get a yes. They already don't trust you, right? So I wear solid colors, except for the interview, I wore my camera t-shirt. But I wear a lot of solid colors and a lot of earth.
All right, we're recording again.
Okay.
You were talking about solid colors, sorry.
So yeah, technical difficulties, but we're winning again. But yeah, so I think doing a little bit of research on the place you're going to shoot and trying to blend in and look like the people there goes a long way. And so asking people to take their street portrait, for example, I started learning how to get them to trust me instantly. And that's literally what you're doing. If you're asking someone for a portrait that you've never seen before, that you'll probably never see again, it's not even about photography. It's about trust at that point. And how can I get this person to trust me in 3 seconds?
Yeah.
Not only to trust me, to let me walk away with a high resolution image of them and then just walk off with it, right? So I think learning how to get people to trust you goes a long way into making them comfortable after they've seen you take a shot of them.
Yeah.
I have certainly had to tell people, like, oh, yeah, I'm a street photographer, and here's the shot. And I keep something that I haven't seen a lot of street photographers do, is I keep cards on me to give them. What I've learned is if you were like shooting people, and I try to shoot people, but I also try to shoot proof that there was people, if you give them a card and give them a way to receive the image, they're happy.
Yeah.
I think people are uncomfortable with you having an image of them that they don't have.
Sure.
So, and I know that because I've said, hey man, I really like the hat you got and the cigarette. I'm a street photographer. Can I take a street portrait of you? And they'll go, no. And I'll go, okay, well, I'll say, well, here's my card. I'm Jason. I'm a street photographer. And if you change your mind, let me know. Now, most of the time I'm traveling, and I know if they let me know in a week, it won't matter because I won't be there.
Yeah.
But that's the trick that I have. And they go, well, how many shots you want to take? Just like that, there's a legitimacy about what you're doing. And and they also know that they have a way to see the image or get it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, shooting film is different. When I shoot film and I'm like, I can't even show it to them. I'm like, I think we won. We won't know for a while, you know. But still having the cards gives them a way to see your work and to kind of maybe build some trust. And I certainly don't mind editing a photo that I've taken of someone, even if it doesn't make my Instagram. You know, I think for them being a good sport,
Yeah.
it's worth it for me to take 3 minutes to edit a shot of them and send it to them.
So you just mentioned film. Do you have a preference between film? I know there's like whole debates about this online.
Yes. So
everybody's got their own opinions and stuff. But
as far as image quality goes, I like film. I like the fall off. That's an entirely different discussion. I just don't think digital holds a candle to a well exposed and well composed film shot. There's something about it that's very organic. And I think that's because photographers are aware that when they're shooting film, it's going to cost them money. And I think digital shooters are also aware that it's not costing them any more money once they've got the gear to just shoot. But I think there's just something about the organic nature of film and how it presents, even in a scan. That is just hard to beat. I think that there's some camera manufacturers that do a great job at film simulations, but I think it's a mistake to think that the simulation looks like film.
Yeah.
I think the people that say, oh, this Fuji so-and-so looks like Acros, I'm like, yeah, until you put an Acros shot next to it. You know what I mean? Yeah, by itself, it goes, yeah, it looks like film. And like, well, here's a film shot of that. It's like, okay, it kind of doesn't, but it gets close. And I think it's a good balance. I think people want that look or get close to that look without the expense of film.
Sure.
And especially if you're doing client work and it's high turnaround work, that's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not developing at home to get something, send it off, get it back, tweak it, and get it out to them versus having everything when you take the shot.
Do you think that if you didn't know something was shot on film, that and then someone presented a well exposed and edited digital, maybe even like medium format digital,
Right.
To sort of look more like film, particularly on Instagram, do you think most people could notice the difference? Because my thoughts is sometimes that you're right about that feeling of film and the organicness about it and the sort of tactile analog feel, and I sometimes wonder if like we bake that into our own perceptions because
we know.
It's kind of a fun process.
Right. I think there's certainly some people that started on film and moved to digital for cost and spent a lot of time comparing the two.
Yeah.
And to making their digital stuff look like film.
Yeah.
I think that most photographers that think that they have a film look that I've met, they don't have a film look. They have a great look. I'm not saying the shots aren't fantastic. I'm just saying I actually shoot film, and while it looks fantastic, it doesn't look like film. Right.
Yeah.
Now, I also think that depends on the medium. Like you said, you're looking at something this big on your smartphone. I don't really pixel peep on Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
but if we start printing that stuff out, and then you start
difference.
printing it bigger and bigger, you start to being able to see the crack. I think digital photography is fantastic. I like to balance my digital stuff with my film work. I'm never going to just shoot a lot of film. I've given myself 3 undeveloped rolls, a rule.
Mm-hmm.
If I got 3 undeveloped rolls, no more.
Yeah.
And that keeps me honest for the most part. And there's people that we personally know, with bags of undeveloped film from 6 years ago. And I gotta admit that would be cool to just shake this giant trash bag up, pull something out that could be 7 years old, and develop it and go, oh, I remember that. You know what I mean?
I think that's a good place to leave it.
Okay.
And we've probably got about 35, 40 minutes.
Yeah, I was trying to go long so you can chop it up however you want.
So. I'll probably just try and leave it as simple as possible.
Yeah.
I don't know really how to end it, but thank
Yeah.
you for taking the time, man.
Yeah, man. That's
Just
pretty
switch
cool,
us
man.
off.